Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for participating in the webinar, the Business Line Knowledge Series on the aviation sector. We have been conducting a series of such webinars for a few weeks now on subjects ranging from the banking sector reforms to whether it is time to end quarterly results. This one is about a very popular sector, the aviation sector, that has been severely impacted by the pandemic. We have experts representing the airline sector, the airport infrastructure sector, and we plan to discuss during this 45 to 50 minutes on what the future looks for the industry. We have a very distinguished panel here. Mr. Hari Marar is the Managing Director and the CEO of the Bangalore International Airport Limited. His team works round the clock to ensure that the passengers have a very smooth and seamless experience at the airport. Mr. Sunil Bhaskaran, the Managing Director and the CEO of AirAsia India.
Hi.
Thank you. He is one of the country's, his airline is one of the country's leading budget carriers. And Dr. Ashwini Khanna, who has a doctorate in aviation and is an executive director with Aerotech Support Services.
Hello.
So let me give you some kind of a theme on this. And as you know, these are very difficult times for business and the aviation industry, and the industry has been hit very hard globally. According to the International Airline Industry Body IATA, airlines are expected to lose around $84 billion in 2020, with revenues expected to fall by as much as 50% to around $419 billion. So I've just, I also wanted to know, how as far as India is concerned, the aviation industry is expected to lose around 3 million jobs with a 43% reduction in passenger demand, which means a drop of around 89 million passengers. For the June quarter alone, the domestic airline industry is expected to lose around $3.5 billion. So looks like there will be no good news for any time soon. So I will ask each of the panelists to, share their views, and then we'll go for another round. So let me begin the discussion with Mr. Bhaskaran. Mr. Bhaskaran, how much worse will it get before the sector starts looking up?
Just to give a little bit of context for everybody who is, viewing in, the Indian aviation was closed from the 25th of March till the 25th of May, and we have started back flying from the 25th of May. The government had allowed carriers to come to about 33% of their summer schedule capacity. But if you were to layer it on top with the constraints at different airports and different states with regards to what they wanted to do with maximum number of flights and the quarantine rules and all, it ended up with about between 23 and 25% of the summer schedule capacity being flown by the carriers. And this happened from 25th May till the end of June. The government has now allowed this cap, not exactly a cap, but this suggestion to be at about 45%. And if you see the daily passenger load right from the 1st of June till the end of June, there has been no change. It's between 60 and 65,000 passengers per day. It doesn't look feasible just now that there would be any increase in the capacity. At least from the early bookings we can see for the next week, next 2 weeks, most of the bookings now are closer to the date of flying. It doesn't look as if it's really picking up. So yes, it's operating today at about 20 to 25% of capacity. July doesn't look that there's going to be a significant uptick from what we are seeing just now, but I'd be happy to be proved wrong. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Marar, how's the airport infrastructure shaping up to the new normal?
Well, Giri, I think Sunil has already set the context in the sense that the impact has been massive. The to at this point of time to say how quickly the recovery will happen is practically impossible because we still don't know what is yet to come. One can at the best look back and say what has happened so far. For traffic to recover from here, I think there are some fundamental issues that need to be eliminated, including the requirements for quarantine that exist at this point of time. As long as quarantine requirements are there, I don't see traffic recovering too quickly at this stage. But I do believe that there might be a few measures that might help the recovery of domestic traffic a little sooner than international traffic. Having said that, I think the infrastructure in the aviation industry has actually coped up quite well. And from the point of view of coping up, it's not just the airports that have had to do the coping, but airlines, all the members of the ecosystem have had to do fundamental changes to the way they function to cope with this requirement. So specifically from an airport perspective, we're focused on 4 areas. I think starting with screening and scanning of passengers to ensure that before they enter the airport, the prerequisites for travel are in place. For instance, they don't have fever, or the fact that they have an Arogya Setu app and the Arogya Setu app is clear, etc., etc. Second aspect is to how to make sure the infrastructure is ready to manage social distancing requirements. So whether it's providing signals to passengers so that they themselves know how much they need to distance themselves. So you see these markers on the floors and things like that.
Yeah,
Plus
yeah.
active management, where people get into active management of telling people, listen, why don't you guys separate out a little bit more? So some form of active management as well. Third area has been in the area of ensuring complete sanitization and cleaning of the airports I think the only way to describe it is in obsessive manner. At one point of time, obsessive compulsive was a bad word, but I think obsessive compulsive cleaning of airport terminals is something that we have gotten into. So every surface that can be touched, every contact point that passengers can come in contact with must be cleaned repeatedly over and over again so that we leave very little to chance. And the fourth element, and I think that has been quite revolutionary, is the way, at least in Bangalore Airport, we've been able to implement contactless processing. Using technology, quickly move into contactless processing, which means that any surface that you would have had to touch, we must eliminate that by saying that, listen, how can we eliminate contact with the passenger to that touch point? Or anything that requires exchange of documents, which is another way to perpetuate touch. I think that's been eliminated from the process. So these are some of the changes that we have done in terms of airport infrastructure. And I must say, it is a compelling case of transformation, which has resulted in providing a lot of comfort to passengers and a lot of confidence that aviation actually is the best form of travel today.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Khanna, an outsider perspective, you have listened to Mr. Marar as well as Mr. Bhaskaran. So how do you look at the scenario emerging out?
Sure. Thank you so much, Giri Prakash. So to start with, in my opinion, the first things which I feel would be most important into getting back the passenger confidence for them to come start flying. If you look at business till just about a year back, we were all struggling with the airport infrastructure, the airlines, with the number of aircrafts that they had, with the kind of business requirements. Now suddenly, we find that there are less passengers than what we would have expected them to be at this time. So coming back, passengers are all there, business is all there. It's just gone into a little hibernation, and it would come out looking into how the environment, reacts and supports their coming back to their business and their normal lives. I totally agree with what Mr. Bhaskaran and what Hari have told, that the quarantine requirements, such kind of requirements eventually, when they go off, the confidence of passengers to travel and to start getting into regular routine business would come back. I think most important that we keep forgetting with all of this is that passenger confidence would come back from those passengers who are traveling right now. When you and I talk and everybody is here on board, there are some passengers somewhere in India who are flying, and their experience will be narrated to many thousands of people, and their confidence to come back or not to come back or to wait would all depend on how things go on right now. While I know the airports and airlines have done a lot to make sure that the passengers feel safe, are comfortable, but end of end, there is something called moment of truth. Somewhere, all the stakeholders at an airport within an airline system, if they are understanding of this fact that these passengers who are flying today are the ones who will decide how fast the passengers come back. And I think that needs to be looked at first. And I'm really happy and I must appreciate what Bangalore Airport has been doing, which is
Yeah.
the initiative to do a touchless
Which
technology.
is true.
I think going forward, this would really instill confidence and
Mhm.
will also be the way of business going forward.
Yeah, that's very interesting observation, Mr. Khanna. Mr. Bhaskaran, I wanted to know, before the pandemic started, the airline industry was to a certain extent not doing well. So taking off from there, how do you see the airline industry panning out in the future? What are the things that you think are required? You had huge, I'm talking about the airlines in general, domestic airlines in general. If you look at that, there was overcapacity and the airfares were at a low, and the October, November, December quarter wasn't exactly good enough for some of the airlines. So how do you look at these airlines actually emerging out of this crisis? Will it take much more time for the domestic airlines compared with, say, a domestic airline in other countries?
So I think there are two parts to it. One is the real sustainability of Indian Airlines, with or without the impact of the pandemic, and the other is what the pandemic has done just now. So as far as the pandemic is concerned, I think it's well appreciated that we don't know what the time frame is going to be, whether it's 12 months or 18 months or 24 months,
Yeah.
but it's significantly going to impact airline operations for those time. But within that, it's quite clear that the regions which have strong domestic capacity or domestic demand or domestic network are likely to come up first, and international will probably take a little longer to come back. And to that extent, India having a very big enough domestic market is well placed to see that the domestic demand comes back soon, as soon as we are able to build more confidence for the passengers to fly. And therefore, that part of the airline network for the Indian carriers would probably kick off earlier. And there are different views to it, but we are assuming that anywhere between 60 to 80% will come back within the next 9 months, which is by the last quarter of this financial year. So that's as far as the pandemic is concerned, and I think I must compliment the government for one piece, which is I think to get back. We closed on March 25th, came back on the 25th of May, but in between the kind of effort which was done between the different stakeholders, which includes the airports, the airlines, the ground handlers, the regulator, the ministry, the health experts, to put together the new protocol, I'm not so sure many countries have managed to do it in the manner that India has managed to do. So that's a great, and every participant in this chain has really worked on it to change what was once we started restart of the operations from the 25th of May, and which is why the customers who are traveling now, which Ashwini mentioned about, Hari was talking about, have had a far higher confidence of what they've seen for anybody who has taken a flight post 25th of May. Because the entire protocol has changed, there's a heightened sense of feel of safety, and whether as an airline we do the net promoter score, which is to understand the customer satisfaction, or the airport does their own customer satisfaction measures, those are all significantly higher than what it was pre-COVID and significantly higher than what our targets were. So it just shows that the people who are flying have got solid confidence in the way the the new protocol has been put in place, and for that, I think it's been anchored well by the Civil Aviation Ministry to get all the participants on the program and ensure that all the changes were done very quickly. As far as the fundamental structure of the Indian airline industry is concerned, you're right. There are questions because if you really see in terms of the operational profitability, I wouldn't say that anybody has really had a good run at it, and there are some fundamental factors. I'm hoping that some of those factors, like the high fuel price in India because of the tax structure, some additional taxes as far as the MRO and the maintenance part is concerned. Some of these need to get corrected so that going forward, structurally we are better placed, because on an overall, I think we are some of the finest low-cost carriers in the world in terms of the other than that cost factors, but cost structure. But because of these couple of things, I think Indian aviation has a higher cost structure compared to most other airlines in other countries.
Mr. Bhaskar, it will be interesting to know what went behind the scenes before the airline operation started. I would like to ask a similar question to Marar, but first to you.
Yeah. So I think that's a good question to ask. And I think being in the industry, we actually know the way it's been addressed by different countries, whether it's the US or China or other countries in the ASEAN. And the Civil Aviation Ministry under the secretary had set up, under the joint secretary had set up a committee which looked at the entire, the entire value chain, and suggestions came from all airlines, from all airports, as to how we could address the basic issues concerned with contactless. You'd be surprised, we were at maybe about 30% by pushing it hard in terms of online web check-in prior to COVID-19, and post-COVID-19, we are at 95% plus. Unheard of, unthinkable, but this is the kind of contactless stuff which has happened. You go to the counter, you need not exchange the baggage tag. It would be sent to you by SMS. So in many ways, technology has really been used, digital has been used very well to transform the way it's being operated. Boarding passes to be stamped, all of these e-boarding passes, all of these, under the government umbrella of the Digi Yatra is also getting worked on. So I think India will be, in terms of using digital, using technology, using collaboration across stakeholders, be right up there in terms of getting things to start working all over again. So that's a great job done. The last week was very chaotic for us because, there was a lot of changes. Different states came out with new quarantine laws. We had to put in some pieces of the customers' self-regulation and what they had to fill up as a form so that it would be given to every single state at the landing point with every single customer, so that should there be a COVID positive case, the contact tracing would have been much easier in terms of contact details of the person in the destination city. All of those things the airlines did, magically over the last week, and got it running from the first flight on 25th May morning.
Yeah. Coordination between government agencies and the airline. I understand even India was involved in it.
Yes.
So how did you instill that kind of confidence among the
one of
government
the
agencies?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One of the issues which came up was about the quality of the air quality inside the aircraft. And obviously it's a concern, if you have this pandemic, which is spread by virus particles, how would you ensure that people traveling inside the airline, inside the aircraft for 2 hours, are ensured that there's no transmission, across, should there be a positive case inside the aircraft. Now, once you look at the technology of airlines, and I would like to say these three things. One is every jet that we have as a narrow body has a HEPA filter. Now this HEPA filter is something which is used in hospital surgical rooms. And it can, for the virus of this size, which is between 0.06 to 0.14 micron, it can take out 99.99% of the virus through this HEPA filter. So all aircraft that we fly in India have that, number one. Number two, we have 100% air change 20 to 30 times every hour. With every 2 to 3 minutes, there's a complete new fresh air change inside the aircraft. And the third is we have a downward push flush of air across every seat, which ensures that the air comes from the top, gets sucked out from the bottom, and there's no front, back, or sideways movement of the air. So all of these ensures that even should there be a particle which was to be transmitted, it gets killed or it gets negated by these three. And apart from that, as an additional measure, it was ensured that should a person be allotted the middle seat, he would be given a gown so that the gown would ensure that there's no touch between the shirts of a window or an aisle seat, because all of these put together, and on top of that, there was a mask mandated in India and a face shield which would cover the eye. So the mask covers the nose and the mouth, and the face shield covers the eyes. So all this put together, and you do a good hand hygiene, it's next to impossible that this transmission would happen. For the cases from 25th of May, where there were COVID positive cases on flights which were, discovered after testing post landing, on all of those you can track back because 14 days is what it would be. Not a single passenger on any of the flight, other than the case which was detected, has had the transmission. That just proves from data and from science that there's no transmission on aircraft at all, which gives a lot of confidence to people.
So looking at the pre-COVID and now, how safe is it for a passenger to say, yeah, he's very confident of flying?
No, so I think this is to do with, I can talk, I'm an airline guy, I would like to say it this way, but it is with data and with science behind it, it looks that it's extremely safe. It's by far the safest mode of travel, because what takes you 2 hours in a plane would probably take you 12 hours on a train. Apart from the time, I've just explained to you how in terms of air quality and in terms of the measures which have been set by the airports, which Hari will talk about, it's become extremely safe. But this confidence will take time. And I think while we would like to believe that there's no chance of any transmission on this, but the risk is same as stepping out to go to a grocery store or stepping out to do any shopping, any of those. It's just the added part of this. But the confidence will come by passengers by themselves feeling that it's extremely safe.
Sure, Mr. Marar, your turn now.
What would you like me to comment about? Sorry, which one?
I wanted to know what went behind the scenes before the airports got ready for the passengers to come in and get into the aircraft. How did you go about doing all the things that you just talked about? The kind of coordination that was there among government agencies and the airport, and how did you instill that kind of a confidence in them, saying that yes, we can do business now?
So one of the words that has been used to describe this pandemic has been unprecedented.
Yeah.
And I think it was not just the pandemic that was unprecedented, but many of the things that happened in the background in response to the pandemic was also unprecedented. And I would imagine the level of collaboration that we saw between the various members of the aviation ecosystem was also unprecedented. I mean, we're used to working together. Aviation does not work if you don't work in collaboration, but the level and the intensity of collaboration that we saw was unprecedented. Of course, the architect, the whole thing, and putting everything together into one room was the responsibility of the Ministry of Civil Aviation. But I think there was a great spirit of collaboration that all the members of the ecosystem demonstrated. Having said that, I think there was also a lot of work that had to happen in the back end so that every entity can put, input, high quality inputs into the whole discussion. So, for instance, at the airport, what we had done was we had established a R&D unit. The responsibility of the R&D unit was constantly to research and figure out what is happening in the world out there in the area of COVID.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
How can we bring that very quickly back? So, for instance, one of the things that we did was we collaborated very quickly with a bunch of youngsters at the IIT Mumbai who had developed a robot, and we saw how quickly we could repurpose that robot to come and work in airports to handle cleaning of what we call the 3Ds: dull, dirty, and dangerous areas. The 3D areas. So in areas like that, the robot could go in and using three types of cleaning: the regular cleaning, but also using sodium hypochlorite to disinfect, and then on top of that have UV treatment as well to make sure it's completely clean from all perspectives. Similarly, from a technology standpoint, we had another group. We anyway have an innovation lab at Bangalore Airport, innovation lab that's co-hosted with Accenture. So that innovation lab quickly worked with our technology service provider and was able to quickly turn around and get that service provider to be able to deliver the contactless service. That happened in less than 2 weeks, which I think is great by any standard. So similarly, I think there were a lot of special measures that were put in place. I must say, Bureau of Civil Aviation Security did its part too. The fact that they were so quickly able to do away with the requirement of stamping of boarding passes, a requirement that has been in practice in Indian aviation for so many years. But I think they quickly did away with that because they realized that it was important not to exchange documents and security still can be ensured. Similarly, frisking of passengers. Earlier, the requirement was even as you walk through the door frame metal detector, beeps or not, does not beep. It was important for every passenger to be frisked. I think Bureau of Civil Aviation did away with that norm as well. That only if it beeps do we need to frisk a passenger. They would also do, of course, profiling and things like that. But I think everybody worked together in close tandem, worked together in close collaboration to make this happen. So, like I said, it was unprecedented the way this.
This unprecedentedness, if I can say that, actually meant that there was no template to go by.
That's right.
Right. So I also understand that the ministry was up to the mark, even though they didn't have this kind of a template, nor did the airports have. I understand the kind of coordination that went into it was exemplary. And that itself has actually, led to another template for you to refer in case something, God forbid, something like this happens. What was the kind of cooperation that you received from the government, especially the ministry?
So, I'd like to recount for you the conversation that we had with the Secretary of Civil Aviation for the first time. When he called for the first time, I still remember his briefing to all the members of the aviation ecosystem was like this. He said, listen, India has done an outstanding job at that point of time, towards the end of the lockdown, had done an outstanding job in containing the spread of this virus. And the responsibility, gentlemen, on all of us is to ensure that the reopening of this sector should not result in undoing all the good that we have done in the past so far. So that was I think that was a perfect briefing to give, because that really set the stage for us to say, hey, listen, how do we ensure that in the manner that we operate, we do not allow for transmission? So you saw what Sunil said a few minutes back. I think in the aircrafts, they did such an outstanding job, despite the fact that middle seats were not kept vacant in India. They did such an outstanding job in putting people next to each other, but in ensuring that not a single case of transmission has been traced back to the transmission having happened on board the aircraft. Similarly, in airports as well, through social distancing measures, through cleaning of the surfaces, the kind of work that everybody did was incredible. And all that goes back to that one briefing that the Ministry of Civil Aviation gave, saying that our responsibility is to make sure we don't undo the good that our country has done so far. Apart from that, I think the ministry was, the secretary himself was chairing all the meetings. The joint secretary was involved at a very close level in defining the SOPs right down to the last detail. I must say, she went down to the last detail in defining exactly what the steps that must be taken. And I think all that went a great way in delivering today the kind of, let's say, assured service that the aviation ecosystem is delivering to the passengers.
Mr. Khanna, being an outsider, how do you look at the airport of today and the airlines? Are there any issues that is worrying you? If you could share those thoughts with us. Mr. Khanna?
Compliment. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
So I must compliment both Mr. Sunil and Mr. Hari. I think they've done a tremendous job in their own organizations in doing what is best for passengers. And I must compliment both of them. It's not easy running an organization, meeting so much of expectations, especially in times which are not very clear. People don't know what to do, what are the right formulas. I think both of them have stood very well and set very good examples. Having said that, I think it is equally important. I am very, very happy that media is now coming forward. Within the industry, there are a lot of webinars, seminars talking about how safe things are. But I think when media takes this initiative, it is very important through you that the passengers or public realizes that aviation or travel by air is the safest mode of transportation today. It remains to be safe, and so much work both at the airport and at the airline level is being done to ensure that that safety in no way is compromised by even a 0.001% in terms of what passengers should feel. They may go out of their house, they may do so many things, but when they travel, there is an extra precaution being taken both at the airport as well as by the airline. And that, I think, should be a very important point to spread and to the people down the line, that at least traveling by air is not a concern. There could be other concerns that they need to be careful, but both at the airport and the airline, there is enough being done as if they would be in their own house. To that extent, safety and cleanliness and all of that is being taken care of. So that I must compliment. But my only concern right now is that as the spread of the coronavirus picks up, the COVID-19 builds up, more and more people get impacted. I think there could be some kind of further norms which may come in, and probably what is being done may have to be added to what is probably being done. But as of now, I must say that the amount of jump to the touchless technology which has happened in the last 2 months, it has not happened in the last 2 years. I can only tell you. And too much of technology jump would also not make people comfortable. So end of the day, while the airline has procedures, the airport has procedures, somebody has to use them. And if they are not used to, suddenly so much of technology coming in, this would also probably not get a very comfortable feeling for people who are traveling.
Which is true.
So
Yeah.
I think while this is the first step, which is and I must compliment once again Bangalore Airport as a flagship airport in our country, which is really leading the way when it comes to digital technology. They really experiment something which are the futuristic things. I think they need to come and stay now. I am more worried about how staff, how other procedures which have been happening for so many years would now have to align going forward. Like Hari was talking about BCAS, and there are other agencies which work at the airport. BCS is the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. So all these agencies, while they have adapted quickly to this change, but more change, and for all these years they've been used to a certain way, pattern, training. I think that also needs to be also looked at, how we proceed and cater to a very large spurt of passenger rise which comes through. I am very hopeful by September, October this year, things will, I wouldn't say they'll become top of the line, but they would be reasonably good. And I think at that time, if the government has some good plans and schemes of support, this would be really, it would be a business which would not worry all of us so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ganapathy. Mr. Marar, I wanted to ask you about the use of technology. Even before this happened, most of the airports were gearing up to use technology as much as possible. And Mr. Khanna says too much would actually be not good. But for example, facial recognition and stuff like that, at some point of time, are going to use this?
Absolutely. I think from using biometrics to travel perspective, I think that it had, what the pandemic has done is accelerated its implementation and execution. So for instance, at Bangalore Airport, we'd already deployed the DigiYatra program.
Okay.
Fundamentally, if you just look at the way you travel today, Giri, it involves two things. You have to produce multiple documents at multiple checkpoints.
Yeah.
The idea is why? Because only to do two things. One, it has to validate your identity, which is why your ID card is used. And of course, it has to confirm that you have a ticket on so-and-so flight. These are the only purposes all those documentation checks do. And that same document check is done at multiple checkpoints at an airport.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was my point. Yeah.
But if you take these two elements and the confirmation that your identity has been validated and the fact that you have a ticket on this flight is linked to any one biometric ID, that's all you require. So let's say it's linked to your face as a biometric ID. You turn up at the airport and present your face. It automatically confirms that, yes, your identity is validated, your ticket is okay, open the doors and lets you go inside. That's as simple as that. That's the purpose of this biometric travel. And I think that is precisely the direction in which we will go. We are working very closely with AirAsia. I think AirAsia, if I'm not mistaken, Sunil, all our testing is completed. And by the 15th of July, we plan to roll out for AirAsia as well this travel. which means AirAsia passengers traveling through the airport will be able to use their biometric ID to travel through the airport, which means no challenge of producing multiple documents again and again. But the use of technology is not just limited to the use to DigiYatra alone. For instance, once you travel, as you're traveling through the airport, the other thing airports have have come to be known for is the quality of experience that you have inside retail, food and beverage.
Right.
And all that can be also offered on a digital platform today. And that's the idea, that our engagement towards passengers will move towards more and more a digital approach. And I think as a result of pandemic, I think digital adoption has also seen a big uptick. A lot of people who were not using digital technologies earlier to now use digital technologies to buy groceries and things like that, as a result of which overall digital adoption of the whole population has gone up. And we're going to take advantage of that as well. And we also see that digital technologies will help to unify how the travel experience is. Today, let's say, Giri, you're traveling from point A to point B. The responsibility of linking all the agencies that have to come together to make your travel complete is actually falling on your shoulder, which means you have to book the taxi to the airport.
Yeah.
You have to travel through the airport. You have to buy the airline ticket. You have to buy. Now, with technology, you should be able to link all that together, leaving the technology to handle the complexity and leaving a seamless front end for the consumer. That's another way technology could play a huge role. And last but not the least, in future, I think health checks are a mandatory element that's going to remain in travel. And I think today the health check system that we have is very intrusive. It's by pointing a gun at your forehead and checking your temperature. It's highly intrusive. And I think using CCTV, using other sensors, we will be able to get to a much unobtrusive health checks in the form. And that's another way technology will play a huge role in the way we travel.
Mr. Bhaskaran, I wanted to ask both Mr. Barar as well as Mr. Bhaskaran and Mr. Khanna about this. The aviation sector has been asking for a lot of doles from the government, but that's not coming at all. And looking at the kind of losses, almost all the stakeholders are suffering because of that. Is there anything else that the government can do instead of providing you those kind of doles? Which of course is not coming anytime at all.
Yeah. So, Giri, before I get to that, I just want to add something to what Hari explained so beautifully.
Okay.
I think one, and which I would like most of the people who are watching in to know, is that I think India is right up there as far as the adoption of digital is concerned for flying globally. Yeah? Because getting into contactless digital, facial recognition based flying is happening in different pockets in different manner all across the world, from China to Europe to US. But I think the way it's being addressed here, it could actually get, could get fast tracked. It's just like the Aadhaar program. It could get fast tracked in a manner where it could become 100% kind of an adoption very quickly. Yeah? And I'm talking about months and not years. So that's one. The second is, like Hari mentioned, the health protocol. I think what happened in 2000 with the, when security protocols changed in a manner that was unprecedented, and people never believed that they would actually get back the confidence of flying on planes because of the security issues. And today it's taken as granted. The entire security protocol which has been put in place has been taken as granted. I think whatever health protocol has now been developed and been, it's been put in place, will again become a natural protocol going forward, not just for months, but for years. And, it may not just be for this pandemic, for at any points going forward. So that's 2 points I just wanted to mention. Coming back to your question, yes, I think like many other sectors, but as a sector which has been most hit, globally, if you go and ask which are the sectors hit and which is right on top in terms of the hits taken, I think aviation will, along with hospitality, come right on top. And in aviation, we have a lot of fixed costs. So we have planes, we have employees, we have other assets, all of which are fixed costs, which need to get paid for whether you're flying or not flying. And the fixed cost in a asset-heavy industry is quite high. So it's extremely difficult for airlines to be, getting to cash profits on the basis of such low levels of flying. When the capacity is 100, you are barely able to fly 25, and that also at 50-60% capacity. In
Right.
effect, you are flying at 10-12% of your capacity, which is extremely difficult to cover the fixed expenses or fixed costs for a larger 100% base, which we cannot cut and go. It's not like a taxi that you have, that you decided that, I have 30 planes, I can give away 20 for the next 12 months and then start looking at it again. The
Yeah.
contracts with lessors are in a manner that those are fixed, and it's it's all next to impossible to come out of those. So it's extremely important that the support is given to the airlines, because I think for the economy, the airline, for the tourism, and for a large part of the GDP is so intrinsically important that it's important that they get supported for the next 12-18 months, because India is unlike many of the other countries. It will surely come back. It's just like, I say, it's like a pause for 2 years. It's a pause for maybe 1.5 years. We were at a high growth path. We were at a high double digit, 17-18% growth for 10 years continuous. And then we have come to a pause which is negative, and then it'll start again, because that's not something that anybody has any doubts on. But these 2 years with these kind of cash losses, it's very important for monies to come in to support the airlines, and that's where any kind of support from the government would be good. Till now, there has been no either support or stimulus from the government financially to the airline sector. But one is living in hope that some of the support will come.
But are there any alternatives if it doesn't come at all?
So the only other alternative is airlines in India are private, so the promoters will have to fund it, because the reality is that there will be losses, cash losses going forward, and depending on each entity, depends on the long-term comfort of seeing the business case. It will come up to promoters to fund it and take this through this pause, which is there for the next 12-18 months.
I'm going to come back to you on this. It's a very important point you raised. But Mr. Marar, what are the things that needed to be done? Because if you look at it, quite a few airports across the world have reduced the capex. But I doubt if the domestic airports in India are doing that. Is it because they are anyway at under capacity, especially Bangalore International Airport, huge under capacity? So how do you look at the scenario?
Two things. Let me first start by saying that aviation is really the lifeblood of the economy. Economy functions on account of people, movement of people and goods, and that's exactly what aviation facilitates. And in that sense, I would not look at government support as a dole or a subsidy. I think that will be completely the wrong way to look at it. I think the support that is provided to the aviation industry must be seen as an investment in the economy itself. Because without that, I do not see the economy recovering. If the wheels of the economy have to move, it can happen only if aviation system recovers. And therefore, to that extent, any support that's provided has to be seen as an investment and not as a subsidy. So that's a big distinction that we have to make.
Right. Yeah.
From the airport's perspective, I think we have a very similar situation as airlines. Our fixed costs are very high, and our revenues are down to zero. So obviously, there's a big mismatch, and it's difficult to deal with it. However, the way I look at it is that how the coronavirus has impacted people is that it's the people with health issues or comorbidities who have been impacted the most. And similarly, I would imagine that it's also businesses that have had comorbidities or issues with regards to their own health that have got impacted. So I think if there's a lesson in this whole thing is that your financial health is of paramount importance, and that companies must prepare themselves for pandemics by remaining healthy at all points of time. From that perspective, I would say Bangalore Airport needs support, but with the support of its private investors, and I think we've got strong private investors in Bangalore Airport. 54% is held by Fairfax, which is a Canadian company, as you know, run by Prem Vatsa, and Siemens, which is 20%, the other 20%. So between these two companies, we've got very strong private backing, which should be able to see us through any kind of financial trouble that we might face in the next few years. As far as investments go, I think it's important at this stage that, I strongly believe in the fundamental demand for aviation in the aviation ecosystem. So the latent demand is certainly there. So if you remove the conditions that are currently, these are not macroeconomic conditions that are resulting in the situation we are in. It's an externality. And the moment you remove that externality by introducing a vaccine, I think demand will immediately shoot back up because there is a need for people to travel. And therefore, to not invest in airports at this in capacity creation at this point of time will be a big mistake. So we are going ahead with our program. I don't know whether you're aware, but right now Bangalore Airport is in the midst of a 13,000 crore expansion program. So we are going ahead with that program irrespective. And in terms of, but yet it's important to be a little bit more mindful about what kind of money is spent on these programs. So in the last, let's say 3 weeks, the team and I have got together and we have managed to reduce our capex by about 1,000 crores. Just to be a little bit more mindful about what kind of money is spent and to be responsible about this expenditure. So we've reduced it by 1,000 crores, but we are going ahead with the expansion because it's important to create capacity, because I promise you the demand is coming back.
Yeah, yeah, that's very good. That's a big positive. I'm not talking about the other one. But the domestic airports, especially the private ones, have some kind of an agreement with the government as far as ROI is concerned, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So the way the economic regulation in airports is structured is that for the aeronautical investment, so airports make both kinds of investment, aeronautical as well as non-aeronautical. For the aeronautical investment, on the equity portion of your investment, you are given a 16% return. That's how the economic regulation works.
Okay.
So obviously, during this period, that return obviously falls way below the 16% threshold.
Yeah.
But while you may not, so airports from that sense are protected because in the future tariff fixation, the shortfall of revenue will be made good. So the problem is not about return. Problem airports face today is about cash flow. I think the real issue is cash. Do we have cash to survive? So all support that we have sought from the government is not in the form of, let's say, waiver of what we need to pay to the government, but deferment. That's a big difference, because we believe that at some point of time in the future, we will be able to pay. We just need the cash flow support as of now. That's the most important thing.
Dr. Khanna, do you think that the government should underwrite some of the losses of the airlines and the airports?
So number one, I think I have some mixed and different feelings on this part and some different opinions too.
Okay.
I feel the government is economy multiplier. So with aviation, the economy of the country actually gets boosts, and the business stays, above the watermark. And this is a very, very important tool of doing business. It cannot be negated that you in a developed economy have not a very supportive aviation sector. So this, I think the government needs to recognize a bit more, though there is an understanding, but I think there are other priorities right now that the government needs to address. I understand that part. But the quicker the government addresses aviation and aviation activities, the quicker the economy will bounce back. This is what I feel. And I totally agree to what Hari puts across, that, in some form, the government needs to come forward. As Mr. Sunil also puts across, the package which the government has announced is a more futuristic support. What is required right now, between now and when the aviation comes back to a point where the support may not be of that much of significance, it is this period between now and that time when things get better is what the airlines and the airport need to tie through. And the government needs to recognize that part, because it is very important for aviation sector to continue in its growth spree and not to hold back, because growth will come with the kind of economy India has, with the kind of population and the business growth it has. It will need aviation in a big way. It is just that a few months here and there, the government should continue to support this growth in its own way, in terms of subsidizing, in terms of having some kind of interest-free loans right now, so that the businesses tie over. It's very, very important. The actions the government had initially projected, which spoke about route rationalization, which spoke about airports getting privatized, which spoke about the MRO interest, the taxation part of
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
These are all futuristic things, and
Okay.
it will take time for the industry to make use or benefit of these announcements the government did. I think
Okay.
right now, for 6 to 8 months, the industry needs more support from the government in terms of handholding,
Okay. Okay.
either deferment of certain payments or giving them interest-free loan for some time,
Mhm.
and that will only help the whole government, a directive to support the industry by and large and support the economy.
Thank you very much. Now let me take questions from the participants. There is one from Anand Kalyan Raman. He wants to know what relaxations would the industry like on the quarantine rules.
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, he wants to know what relaxations would the industry like on the quarantine rules.
I think, sorry, if I can take a go
Yeah,
at
yeah,
it.
please go ahead. Yeah.
I think at this stage, the quarantine rules that are there are largely appropriate. But if
Mhm.
there has to be a change, if domestic travel has to pick up, I think the most
Mhm.
important thing would be that there might have to be an exception made for business travelers. People,
Mhm.
today's requirement in most places for quarantine is that though it's home quarantine, it requires you to quarantine at home for 14 days. And I think with that rule in place, business travel can never take off. However, for business travel to take off, if exceptions can be made for people who are traveling for 3 or 4 days, not to
Mhm.
quarantine, declare
Mhm.
where they are, and make sure that they're traceable at all points of time, and then they can fly back without requirements of quarantine at either ends. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
enabling provision that will help travel
So,
resume.
yeah, just to add to what
Yeah,
Hari
yeah,
said,
Mr. Bhaskaran. Yeah.
Giri,
Yeah.
I think we completely understand. We completely understand the perspective of the states and addressing an issue which is of paramount importance for the state, and
Mhm.
therefore these rules being in place. But it would be good if there was a little bit of a larger time consistency and stability in whatever these rules are, because and we still understand because of the way they detect cases from a particular state. Therefore it leads to a new measure to that state, but
Mhm.
these kind of changes
Mhm.
I guess is something which is very discomforting for the passenger. And in the first couple of weeks it was chaos in terms of the onus on explaining this to the customer finally came down to the airline in terms of
Yeah,
what is the quarantine policy at the other side.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that it's not everybody is savvy enough to figure that out. There are changes. The changes are not communicated as well enough as you would like to. Things are better today compared to when it started in the first week. But
Mhm.
I guess this lack of this changes in it leads to a lot more discomfort, and which is why I think passengers it does impact travel. Having said that, I think. When you look at from a higher level and the importance or the issues which are really being addressed at the state level, one can understand this.
Mr. Bhaskaran, there's an interesting question from Ashwini Fadnes. He wants to know that the capping airline fares and the capacity as well. Do you think both of them should be removed?
So I've said this earlier.
Mhm.
What we are seeing, and Hari used this word. We've heard this word all over the time. Unprecedented. I think we are dealing with something which is unprecedented. I think to restart aviation after the pandemic and to put in the best protocols is something which worked very well. But
Mhm.
having said that, knowing fully well that the volumes would be very little, I think the
Mhm.
government took a one-time decision to start with capping on the routes, on the capacity, on the having a fair band, because the assumption was that the airlines would go berserk in terms of the pricing on the higher side. But we have seen from the
Yeah.
experience of the first 5 weeks that that's not been the case.
Mhm.
But by capping at the lower end, the ability to stimulate demand, which airlines typically do, and that's the model of revenue management in airlines, to
Mhm.
stimulate future demand has been kept out of the ambit. Having said that, the way things are today, and with this prime importance of building the confidence as far as the consumer is concerned, it is not looking like future demand really could be activated, but that lever is out of our hands. So as we believe, it's a very, very, very temporary measure, and
Mhm.
in the long term, it has to be addressed by market forces, and that's the only way to ensure a healthy airline ecosystem. But the next 12 months, there are other serious challenges on the health of the airline ecosystem.
a very interesting question from a participant, Golak Maikap. He wants to know what are the learnings from the passenger behavior? Mr. Marar and Mr. Bhaskaran, how do you look at that?
So if I could take it first from
Yeah,
the
yeah,
airline
sure, please go
perspective,
ahead. Yeah.
I just mentioned about the fact that whoever has traveled has given us extremely positive feedback, because one can understand that before coming into the airport, they have all kinds of apprehensions, all kinds of things they've heard from friends, relatives, and try to keep it away. So when they see the distinct change of if you had traveled on 24th of March versus if you travel on 26th of May, in terms of the entire, digital, contactless, safe, clean, etc., it gives a huge amount of confidence. Having said that, with regards to social distancing, one of the issues we used to have in the early days was, and I don't know whether it's only specific to India, when the plane lands and it touches the gate, people feel that one has to rush and just get out of that door.
Yeah.
It's and in spite of all kind of announcements by the captain, by the cabin crew, this was something which took time, but I understand now it's totally settled down, except for a couple of cities where we still have an issue. People actually deboard row by row. So some of these consumer behavior in terms of social distancing took a little more time, but it seems to be fitting in much better now, in spite of the fact that most travelers are first time in the new post-COVID world travelers, because not many people are traveling twice and thrice. So that's settled down quite a bit. So it's about the social distancing norms. I don't think, unlike in many of the advanced world, there have been any issues on wearing of mask. I think that's become, it's not a question which comes up here in India. People are very careful and everybody wears a mask, unlike in many developed world where people question it, there are people who don't wear it, etc. The other good one, and I'm happy the Civil Aviation Ministry insisted on this, was to use the face shield. So you must be aware that every airline gives every passenger a pack of PPE, which includes the face shield, which includes another face mask in case he wants to use it, and a couple of sachets of the hand sanitizers. So this has been used very well and our crew also insists on telling people, but that behavior has really caught on. It's far, far better now than at the beginning. But there's no, the discipline of the face mask is 100% in India.
Mr. Marar, how do the passengers behave in the airport?
I think I'll look at it from two perspectives. One is from their own expectations. I think passengers are very clear that they expect to find a safe and secure environment at the airport. And I think that's clearly something that we have seen coming through. More than anything else, what they're looking for is safe and secure environment to travel through. They prefer touchless experiences as much as possible. So their adoption to touchless technology has been fantastic. Digital adoption, I think that's been the great story for all of us. I think the fact that we announced that everybody must, the Civil Aviation Ministry announced everybody must come to the airport web checked in. And from day one, 95% of the people turn up web checked in. I think that was a amazing win for civil aviation in India. Payments today, we said we will not accept cash, we will not accept credit cards, and nobody has a complaint. Everyone's using Google Pay to Paytm to all the digital payment mechanisms. It's working really well. From a behavior standpoint, two things stand out for me. One, I think Sunil referred to that. Discipline has been exceptional. We don't see indiscipline in the airports. If you're supposed to wear a mask, everybody just wears a mask. Finished. There's no debates and discussions around, can I not wear a mask? Can I pull it below my nose? I can't breathe. No complaints.
That's very good. Okay.
That is, from a discipline standpoint, outstanding. The only other thing that I'd like to talk about is that the nature of social media activism is different now. Earlier, if you find, let's say, security being compromised or whatever, people would take a picture and tweet. But today, it's about if people are not maintaining social distancing, if something is not kept clean. So people have become themselves a lot more aware on that topic, and social media activism has taken on that sort of color. So, but it's good because I think it's a reminder to all of us that we need to be on our toes at all points of time.
Mr. Bhaskar, another interesting question. This is from Sarvajit Bodas. He wants to know whether the corporate traveler traffic will reduce because there are so many apps. You have the Zoom itself. So there is no necessity to travel at all, or at least curb that kind of a travel.
Yeah.
And that's a large chunk of your revenues, right?
Yeah. No, so that's a very valid presumption, and I think many of the corporate travelers, including all of us, have realized the power of communication like the one we are doing just now. and corporate travel will get readjusted over time. It's been an important part of the. So if you take the three basic segments which travel, one is the business or corporate for business, the other is the visiting friends and relatives, the VFR, and the third is the vacationing. So there will be a drop. I heard some statistics from the Delhi airport where, if you take the travel from the day one till today, in the beginning, a lot of the travel was for people who had been dislocated and would want to, relocate to the, that was almost 48% of the initial day's travel, which has largely settled down over the first 2 weeks. And the fact that we are still at the same level means that there are others who are now picked up and filled in that bucket to travel. Because as I said, the travel at about 60 to 65,000, maybe now 70,000 passengers per day continues to be the same level as it's been. So yes, the answer is yes. Corporate travel has come down, will come down. There will be a relook at budgets because of the corporate, the way they're doing. But more than that, finding out that much of these kind of meetings could be done effectively over things. Having said that, I think it's impossible to take the connect out of what comes from face to face. So it'll be a mix of both, but overall will come down, but it's not that it'll become zero. And as soon as confidence or a vaccine or some kind of a cure comes into play, we expect corporate travel will move up, but it won't come back to the levels that we probably had prior to COVID.
Okay. This one is from Kashish Arora for you. The question is about the credit versus cash as far as reimbursements are concerned. So wanted to know how what is the best way forward. Apparently, there's some kind of a rule way back in 2008 where the passengers could decide whether they wanted a cash or credit. How do you look at the scenario?
No, so even today, while it's a very important part of the cash flow for airlines, because advance booking is one of the levers of cash flow as far as airlines are concerned. But in this, again, I'm using the word unprecedented scenario. We understand this and why we'd like to give the best possible solution to the passengers. But should it come to the option of being a refund, we would like to do that refund. It's a difficult issue for all the airlines because these numbers impact the way airlines operate. But we understand this, and we understand the customer's perspective totally.
Got more questions for you, Mr. Bhaskaran. The other one is about the cargo. Do you think that is the new gold for the airline industry, for the airlines?
So I think there was a period when cargo was a new gold because all transportation was stopped, and therefore the only way to get across was through planes, both domestically and internationally. So for a period, if you see the cargo prices that had peaked, but that peak is out. It was about 4 weeks ago. So that the gold part is out, but cargo as a stream will continue to be interesting. And will be a larger part of airlines than it was before. But that gold part of the cargo is out. That was for a small, maybe for 2 months, 3 months. That's over now.
Maybe
you think this can't? Yeah, please.
Quick perspective on that. I think while passenger traffic has been trailing quite a bit, and it's come down by over 60% from previous times, for us, we've seen a great recovery as far as cargo is concerned. So today, cargo has already reached 70% of the pre-COVID level of volumes, which I think is a great story. For international, we've seen new freighters that have come in. And we believe that even from a cargo perspective, there is a growing belief in the fact that the best way to transport goods in this environment is also actually through air. And we see a resurgence in cargo. So from airport perspective, we are investing big in cargo infrastructure because we believe that there is a gold at the end of the rainbow.
Do you think post-COVID, when you find a vaccine with this contactless system, this entire system of safety will continue? Oh, Mr. Bhaskaran and Mr. Marar?
Yeah, so I think better for Hari to answer, but as I mentioned, just like security protocol got redefined by what happened in 2000, by planes crashing in New York. Similarly, the health protocol is going to continue for years to come, because now the world has realized that we need to live with this pandemic and any future pandemic. So it may get diluted at times, but the ability to come back very quickly will very much be there. I think what will be done with digital, what will be done with contactless, what will be done with many of these other health measures will continue for all times. It may get diluted a little once we have a vaccine and all, but this is the new protocol which is going to stay going forward as far as air travel is concerned.
Okay, sorry, that question was from Mamta Sharma. And Mr. Marar, what do you think? Do you think you will break free and let pre-COVID days happen once the vaccine is discovered and everything is fine? Or will it continue like that? At least for some parts of it.
See, once the vaccine is discovered, I think air travel will go back to its glory days. I have absolutely no doubt about it. I believe people will travel. And the reason why I say this, while of course there will be a slight dampener as far as business travel is concerned, I think Sunil alluded to that fact, simply on account of the fact that there will be a bit more scrutiny around what's really essential travel. That has been brought out by this environment last 3 months when nobody has traveled. People are realizing, hey, business is still happening without people traveling. So probably a few trips that were taking place which were probably not necessary anymore. So business travel from that perspective will not happen. But I think the other thing that's happened is that people generally have realized the frailty of life and will realize to live a bit more in the present. And therefore, their desire to seek experiences will grow. And in that respect, I think leisure travel, people will want to travel because they will want to accumulate experiences and not assets. That desire will grow even further. And last but not the least, I can tell you something. Human beings have evolved over a period of time on the basis of their desire to explore. Quest is what has driven their growth. And I refuse to believe that man's need to touch, feel, explore, experience can be replaced by a virtual medium. So I can guarantee to you that travel will come back, and travel will come back in a strong manner.
Dr. Khanna, do you have any questions for both Mr. Marar and Bhaskaran?
First, I totally agree to
That's a dangerous one.
No, totally agree to what Hari says. I have a feeling that business would continue, and they will find ways and means to how they get across. But yes, the value of life and anything hitting post COVID-19, something else may come up in the world. People will say that we are here for a finite time, and it is important to really explore the world. And I totally agree to Hari on this part, that the drop in the business travel will be replaced by the leisure travel industry, and this is yet it is just to come back. It will come back with a boom, and then again we would be struggling and having such kind of discussions. And is India ready to take this boom? And did we sleep over the last time this happened? I am very confident that business will bounce back. And let's put it this way: the very basics of why aviation happened, because of demographics, because of disposable income, because of how urbanization is taking place in our country. This is not changing. COVID or no COVID, this is not changing. So aviation or travel has to come back. It is just that how long, because nobody knows whether people are going to wait for the vaccine or they will get smarter by discovering that half lime, like Indians are, half lime juice with this ginger paste and this that reduces the whole impact, and then it will be treated like common cold. Today cold has no cure. Many times we travel, we get cold, common cold, and then it becomes okay. I think COVID will soon get replaced something with that. I
hope it does. I also hope that there isn't another lockdown. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Bhaskaran. Thank you, Mr. Marar. And thank you, Mr. Khanna. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.